is this anger controlling you? What is it taking from you? And do you want freedom? God's offering that. No matter how bad things have been, no matter what's happened in your life, I think God still wants to free you from the anger of that and from whatever it's stealing from you. And the cool thing is God can then shape your life so that you can become an advocate for those things. So where I was falling short in my life in alcohol and drug addiction, I can now go speak to people who have alcohol and drug addictions and speak life into them because God has made me a conqueror of that.
Yeah. I think about that in my wife and I's marriage. So
it's another great example.
We went through marriage struggles for 10 years. I went through a real dark period in my life where my wife and I, we resented each other. Neither one of us was willing to look at the issues that we had going on in our life. We had built our foundation of our relationship on drugs and alcohol, not on Jesus. We had a shift in our life where we were trying to build it on the foundation of Jesus, but we never dealt with the experiences we had with drugs and alcohol being a problem in our lives and the lack of Jesus being there. And so consequently the ownership that I'll take on this is that I didn't lead my family through that period of time. And what ended up happening, it really caused me to think through my own childhood. My parents had a really rough marriage for a lot of years, and they separated for a while, and the word divorce was thrown around. And so home was not a safe place for me growing up. My parents have reconciled. Thank God my marriage is reconciled. But I remember holding some serious bitterness towards God. And I had this really, really weird theological view of God. I'm in sales. I'm in 100% commission sales. And so I always had this weird understanding of God. My understanding of God is that if I wasn't obedient, that God wouldn't bless my business. And so here's what was happening in my life. Monday through Saturday, I'm going out drinking and getting drunk. And nothing about my life looked like Jesus throughout the week. But then on Sunday, I've got to show up every Sunday. I've got to serve, and I got to make sure I tithe. Because if I don't do those things, then God won't bless my business. I lived in that terrible theological viewpoint for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And it harbored bitterness towards God in my heart because I was just angry all the time at him. Like, how come I'm doing this so right, but my life looks like this over here? And I blamed God for a long time for these poor decisions that I didn't have a growing up that showed me what a marriage would look like, that my wife and I were at odds all the time. And my problem is I was never looking at me going, well, I'm the problem here. I wasn't willing to. It was just easier for me to live on the backside of that on Sunday morning, trying to live my life for God just so my business would stay in a certain mode. But the rest of the week, I wasn't willing to submit my life to God whatsoever. And for me personally, that just caused a lot of anger for a lot of years. What had to happen is I had this twisted view of who God was that had to be untwisted. And the untwisting of that is where I really found freedom in being able to live my life for God, knowing that God isn't up there just like, just waiting to trounce on me every little mistake that I make, because that's just not who God is.
There's a couple of things I heard there. I'm going to reword them and hopefully simplify them, and then you can tell me if I'm right here.
Okay.
But the external factors were mom and dad had a dysfunctional marriage.
Yes.
You then took that and carried that into life, and here's where you become accountable is you maybe, rather than taking their bad example and spinning it and having good example to contrast it, you just kept doing bad things, and then you'd blame those actions that you were taking on God.
Right.
But it is about the choices you make thereafter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about submitting this pain to God and saying, hey, God, my parents were a terrible example, and now I'm living a terrible example. And at some point in time, you had to hit your knees and go, God, I don't want to live this terrible example anymore. And clearly, the path that I've chosen is a bad path. The way I went about designing this doesn't involve you. And I want to invite you into it. I want you to take over this thing, and I want you to put me on the right path. Mm-hmm. And you've had to continue to make that choice thereafter.
That's the part right there.
Of course.
Continue.
So as you continue to submit your marriage to God, he then takes over and helps shape it. So there's an accountability thing that has to happen and say, yes, these very bad, awful, terrible things happened to me in one form or another that were out of my control, especially if you were a kid. And you might have learned bad things about who God is. You might have terrible examples around you of people that say that they are followers of God, right? There's plenty of that.
That's a big one today.
But at some point in time, what I'd submit is that you have to take ownership over what you can change.
That's it.
About the way that you are going about maybe dealing with this pain or this trauma, and taking action on how you're going to change things in the future, or you're just going to remain that victim. And I don't think that's where God wants anyone to be.